If you're at my age, you likely have seen a utility person coming to your house, your apartment, and checking the utility meters for gas, for electricity, for water consumption. And they've been like coming with a notebook and reading the measure on the meter. You don't see that anymore these days, right? Or it's pretty rare on very remote location. And this is because utilities are modernizing the way they are capturing that information. But maybe you would assume that this information is shared from these meters on a regular basis over the air. That's not the case yet. With Michael from Diehl, we'll talk about the state of the art for technology in the metering space and how LP1 technologies, IoT sensors, and platforms help utilities digitalize and modernize their infrastructure to give their customers and themselves more information about consumption. We'll see how mioty is a very interesting LP1 technology that is changing the way you can implement IoT communication in that domain as well. If you like this episode, do not forget to subscribe, give us a like, leave a comment as well to let us know what you think. Thank you. Hey everyone, this is the IoT Show. I'm Olivier, your host. Thanks for tuning in. Today with Michael, we will talk about metering and the state of the art in that domain. Hey Michael, how are you?
I'm fine so far today, yeah.
Yeah, where are you calling from?
I'm living in Germany, close to the nice city of Nuremberg.
Nice. Okay, how's the weather right now?
Oh, today it's rainy. You can see it's the weather is not that good.
Yeah, it's like in Seattle. I mean, Seattle is like really bad today. Anyways, so tell us about yourself. Who are you? What is your job, and why are you here on the IoT Show?
My job is being solution architect at Diehl Metering. So, Diehl Metering is selling water meters and heat meters, and beside collecting the data of these meters, a lot of customers have always additional requests. So, we need solution architects who take care of giving added value to beside the metering business. Let's say building up fixed networks, kind of data collection system to ensure meter readings that the customers can detect later on leakages in their networks and something like that.
So, Michael, tell me a bit more about Diehl. So, what is it that you guys are doing? You say you're metering and sensors at a very high level, but can you show me an example of a solution you guys are developing, how it looks like today, and how it helps modernizing the world of utilities and metering?
Yeah, of course. We have a project in Germany, which is pretty well known already. We can show there something. Um, So this is the city of Erfurt, and what you can see is if we display the meters, then you see with all these blue needles, every blue needle is then a kind of water meter, which is located in a basement area or in a kind of pit area. Pit mean it is on the street level, underground, covered by a concrete pit. And typically, if we go into that kind of direction, you want to have readouts because you want to detect leakages in field. And to get leakages, you need at least, let's say, every hour you need a data package of the volume that you can identify where particular in this area is the leak.
Mhm.
And for that, we build up then kind of gateways. So we are using here the mioty technology, and these yellow needles are now the mioty base stations.
Mhm.
And you can see, depending on the area, so we are outside of the urban area, and you have here 3 needles very compact to each other. And if we zoom in, this is because of the landscape. So it's very hilly. You have a lot of forests, and we call it network planning, because with the network planning, we have a success rate out of the box between 95 to 98% of hourly data rate with our equipment. And how it looks like, you can see here then, if we turn on this kind of card, then you see everything is green, and everything which is green, it will be received in basement.
Mhm.
And everything which is non-colored mean there the reception is that poor that we will not get any meters.
Nice. Nice. So you guys are doing more than just the meters, the sensors, right? It's also about the connectivity, the deployment of a network here. In the case of this solution with the mioty network with base stations that are deployed out there to have this coverage of all the places where these meters are deployed. So that's pretty cool. So that's a Diehl is a real IoT company at the end of the day, right? It's not just about the hardware sensor, right?
No, we started in 150 years ago with, let's say, water metering, and over the time, I would say at least the last 25 to 30 years, we started into the topic of radio technology. And 12 years ago, we had our customers were forcing us to give some kind of SLA agreements that if they build up a network with LP1 technologies, that they get this kind of information at least hourly, because only with hourly values they were able, yeah, to do energy optimizations or finding leakages. And to meet these kind of SLA requirements, it was necessary to predict in a very well yeah, to predict them very well, where we need an additional gateway location, yeah, and which meters are covered and not covered. And yeah, based on that, so we started to do this kind of heat maps and predictions, and we have now more than 20 people doing that all over the world. Yeah.
I remember, I'm that old, that I remember utilities people stopping by the house of my parents and coming to look at the meter for electricity or water and take the measure that was written on that box, right?
Yeah.
So we don't see that. And you're like, well, actually, we might see that. But I'm curious to know, what are the myths and realities about how much of the world of metering is digitalized today? How much of these meters are actually connected today? Can you give us some insights into that?
To be honest, this is really not an easy answer you can give. I can say that we see that more and more utilities change from mechanical meters into, let's say, communicated meters. So it mean you do not do any more eyeball reading. This is how we call it. Then you have a digital way to transmit the meter data, and then you receive it. And most of the utilities doing it at least, we call it walk by, drive by, once per year. But in some areas, they are now going in the direction to have, by legal law, to do it every month, to
Mhm.
give this data every month, yeah, to the customers, that they know how much consumption they have already. And in some specific areas like the Nordics of Europe, you can we see that everything is in a more digital way already. So you can say most of the meters are already equipped with radio, and they collect hourly data to do network optimization.
Gotcha. So it's a change that is in progress. You were saying that
Yeah.
having this more refined, more often, data point, but many are still doing that on a yearly basis. They might not be sending someone, but they don't get like we see on some IoT demos, like a data point every second or every 10 seconds. It doesn't work like that, right?
No, it's really working like that. So the meter is transmitting every, let's say, 17 to 30 seconds.
Okay.
It's transmitting all over the day, and then typically the utility have a walk-by system. So a receiver is driving along the street and is then collecting the meter data, just because
Oh,
it
so
is happening all the time.
you have something, a car, someone was actually passing by and getting
Yeah,
retrieving wirelessly. So it's basically in between the continuously connected to the internet and the eyeballing, right? Because you
yeah,
still
yeah.
have to send someone to drive around to retrieve the information. But that's interesting. Well, I'm curious to know, why is that? Why are not all these meters connected to the internet directly? What are the main challenges that you've encountered that don't make that IoT dream of having everything connected all the time possible?
Most of the issues is you don't have connection. So
Mhm.
or if you have connection, it is very power hungry, you can say. So if you go to LTE, for example, given it is already very power hungry because, I mean, your mobile phone,
Mhm.
you have to reload it every day. And then you have another technology which is typically in the mind of people. This is Wi-Fi because everybody has at home Wi-Fi. But the issue of Wi-Fi is, of course, it is power hungry. But you, as utility, you don't want to get how to say, you don't want to be the customer of your customer. So this means at the end is if somebody is putting out Wi-Fi over the night or over some days, or at least he's configuring something in the router that this device is not able to connect anymore, then you're getting as utility in trouble because then you don't get the meter values anymore. And this is one of the effects why today not that many meters are connected. And this is, of course, as we come in contact together, where we did on LinkedIn some kind of exchange about LP1 technologies.
Yep. Yeah, I was about to get to that, which is, so Wi-Fi too power hungry, and we don't want to get into the customer's Wi-Fi. You don't want that, anyways. In general, you don't want to see what's in there. Then you have, LTE, so cellular. Cellular is also power hungry. We can see, narrowband IoT, LTE-M that are starting to become less power hungry.
Yes.
But still more than these LP1 technology we're about to talk about, right? So LoRaWAN is well known, and yes, we did come across each other when I was talking about mioty. So I'm curious to know, it seems obvious for people were familiar with LoRaWAN that hey, this actually could be a great way of having these meters connected,
Yeah.
assuming that we are in a place where there is LoRaWAN coverage, which in cities and so on is a possibility. But tell me a bit more about where you think, from the Diehl's perspective, where you think is the LP1 technologies at in terms of maturity, and whether the drawbacks of some of the existing one like LoRaWAN is already widely used and deployed.
From the meterings perspective, you have currently three main technologies outside of LP1 technology. You have, of course, LoRaWAN. You have the flavors of mioty, and of course, there's NB-IoT. From manufacturer perspective, you can say so far you have high efforts on NB-IoT because you need all these kind of roaming agreements. You have a bigger battery, so bigger costs. And at the end, on cellular technology like NB-IoT, um, if there is no base station, I mean, in close to, let's say, a bulk meter, which is a huge meter with a lot of cubic meters which running through. So somewhere in the field and there is no NB-IoT connection, typically the mobile phone providers don't
Mhm.
install an additional base station close to that location that you can read this kind of meter. And the second topic, what we see is
Yeah.
wireless MBUS. So this is the walk-by drive-by technology, is currently not in combination available with NB-IoT. So this means from metering perspective, on hardware design perspective, you have two chipsets you have to implement on the meter, one for NB-IoT and one for wireless MBUS, that you would be able to combine both technologies, that you have always the fallback that you drive there if you have no connection anymore. And this is something which is much easier with LoRaWAN and mioty because with one chipset, you can talk both technologies. And a lot of metering companies are doing that already. So there's stacks available that you can talk LoRaWAN and in parallel wireless MBUS, and there are stacks available to talk mioty, LoRaWAN, and wireless MBUS.
Okay, kind of a mix of the different technologies. So And that's interesting. You're describing these various options, I would say, in terms of how to connect a device. There's been discussion about which one is better than the other one in general. And there's no real answer, because at the end of the day, each of them have particular features and they work a certain way that makes them more suitable for different scenarios. And you just described, the limitation of NB-IoT. You're not saying NB-IoT is not good. You're saying that for the metering scenario for utilities, it has limitations that would require you to look at something else. But that begs the question, which is, these meters are to be installed for a long time, right? You don't go and change them every other year. So you need to bet on a technology and a system that will last for long, right? So at what point do you decide that you pick one existing technology, like let's say LoRaWAN, versus something else, or go for something that is maybe less used, like mioty is new, and you decide that, hey, you know what, for the long term, that's the one we need to bet on. So how do you make that decision, and what are the implications longer term?
So meters are in place typically, you can say, in between of 12 years and 20 years. We have some projects ongoing, and typically in Germany, you have 12 years plus 1 year storage. So, and then, or 1 year in addition, that maybe due to a meter exchange, you have not the time to change the meter that he's still running. You have an additional year of lifetime. But we had already as well projects ongoing in France for gas meters, for example, given where we created radio modules and they have to live there for 20 years. So this means in that kind of lifetime we are talking about. And for customers, it is really hard to take the decision. And this is why we have a kind of consulting training where we train customers from a technical perspective, what choices they have, and depending on what kind of use case, they should choose then the technology. And
Interesting. Yeah.
and then there is always a second level, it's costs. So this means if you have 30,000 meters somehow, like we roll out at the moment in Erfurt, or we nearly close to finish the rollout in Erfurt, then of course with 30,000 meters and NB-IoT, you have ongoing costs, which you have every year to proceed. And there is as well, we are closing now 2G and 3G. So the question is, when will be which kind of technology closed? And if we are talking about 2G and 3G, I mean, I'm not 100% sure how long they were on the market, but I think 3G was around about now 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then the question is, if we are talking about 15 years or 20 years. So this means there is a second level of investment security. So if we have utilities who have a budget and want to invest in own network infrastructure, then they have an infrastructure which they can use and where they have invested. And typically, if they invest in this kind of infrastructure, then they are independent of changes on the market, at least technology perspective wise, where you have some service fees into, let's say, mobile phone providers. And if the mobile phone provider is cutting down 2G, 3G, in future, maybe somehow, whenever it will be NB-IoT, then they have secured that already because they can run on their own infrastructure then this kind of metering business in addition.
That makes a lot of sense. I can see how for a utility becoming their own ISP is interesting, right? Because you own your own destiny, you're in control of it. And at the same time, it can open up for new business, because you can start thinking about, hey, now I have a network that I use for myself, but maybe I could, offer some devices or services on top of that to the consumers or to other companies that are partnering with me. So that's an interesting approach as well.
Yeah, I mean, at the end, most of the utilities have daughter companies. And as we figured out so far is if they invested into the metering business with the kind of network, however it is LoRaWAN or mioty, then it's opening up a big discussion about their daughter companies to offer, let's say for the sub-metering part for flats and something like that, CO2 sensors, mold detection sensors and something like that. So this means they can digitalize then the commune and their daughter companies to gain for all the inhabitants of the city some benefits.
So let's talk a little bit technical here for a second. I would like to know from your perspective, you're an expert in that domain of metering. Diehl and is a company that is very good at building these sensors and other type of meters. You have an opinion about mioty, right? You are betting on it in many ways. What are the things, the features that you like in mioty that are different from LoRaWAN and other LP1s that you think are valuable and interesting for the world of metering?
For us, or at least for me, I can say we have a bigger payload, what we can transmit via mioty. This gives end-to-end encryption, a real end-to-end encryption, because you can encrypt then the metadata itself. So this means you don't have only a transmit encryption, because you can add an additional encryption on top. So you have transmit encryption and application encryption without having any issues on payload. Because if you put on the biggest range, LoRa, for example, with SF12, you have around about 50 to 51 byte. If you want to add there some encryption on top, then you has to reduce already some kind of data, or you have no application encryption.
Anything about interference resiliency, as in mioty maybe being a bit more resilient to interferences? Because you are usually in urban areas for meters, and there's a lot of waves, in the air that will come and mess up with your signals.
So this was long time a very difficult topic to discuss with customers, because there are some studies available from universities, and of course then you have different kind of flavors of communication. And what we typically can say is, out of the studies and out of that what is communicated, at least the LoRa gateway can handle 2,000 to 10,000 metering points per square kilometer, or like we typically calculate in reading rate of every hour, so that you receive every hour a kind of protocol of the device to have it safe. And there mioty is much better, because there we have hourly reading rates of more than 50,000 devices. So this means, at least if we take the 10,000, we are much better 5 times. And if you compare it to 2,000, so there's a kind of discrepancy of 5 to 25. And this gives the bag more security on robustness and future-proofness, because this secures as well your investment. If you think about that, many, many more devices will come in future, and the band is more loaded and more loaded, and somehow you will get into that kind of issue.
That's part of the one of the concerns that utilities have, which is the long term, right? The vision that goes beyond the next 2 years, because as you were saying, the meters will be out there for 12, 20 years. And so you need to make sure that you are future proof. So, Michael, thanks a lot. I think it was a lot of very valuable information. Professionals in the world of utilities and other industrial professionals will certainly be interested. Diehl offers a training for these kind of professionals to go deeper into the technologies for LP1 in general, or metering in particular. And you guys are offering such a training to companies. So we'll add a link down there. Do you want to add a word about this training? You'd already mentioned that, but what would make someone want to go to these trainings?
Typically, it's really funny, because the training is made for decision makers. So typically, these guys have a kind of study, but it is long-term gone. And then inside of the training, we are talking about dB values. So we are not on range like kilometers. So what you have typically on marketing, we are talking about dB, about transmit power in dBm, and something like that. And it is really, these people are typically shocked. But it is on a kind of level that if we have done these kind of workshops, they understand then, okay, what is really the difference? And many of them say later on, this is really a cool training, because if somebody is coming with a new technology, let's say not LoRaWAN, not mioty, and not mioty, maybe in 5 years there's some new stuff, then I can ask questions, and based on that kind of table sheet and documentation we give, he can ask questions and can then evaluate what is the benefit of this kind of technology. And based on the use case, he has then the possibility to decide if this is a better technology or not.
Awesome. Well, I think you sold it. So hopefully people will go and check it out. We'll put the link down there. Michael, thanks a lot for your time today. That was very insightful and enlightening. So hopefully people will reach out, and thanks for coming again.
Thank you.